Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Ready, Set, Grow. We are going to give you a few minutes to get situated, and then we will be back with our session for this morning. Looking forward to spending some time with you as I'm getting everything set up a little bit here. See you at 9 o'clock, which is just a few minutes away. Good morning. We are here and ready to roll. Welcome to Ready, Set, Grow. I'm happy to have you with us this morning. And as my friend Sanjay Gupta always used to say at Rotary, happy Monday. It's great to be with you. Let's take a look here. And we might as well get started with our kinesiology. And if this is your first time here, we use a little bit of applied kinesiology to get us started because that activates our brain and gets both sides of our brain, right and left hemispheres, connecting and working together. So I'm going to back up a little bit here. I know you won't be able to see me. So we're going to stand up if you're able. If you're not, you can do this from your chair. And the idea is to touch your alternate elbow to your knee. So we're going to do some of those. And if you're not able to do this, you can tap with your hand to the opposite knee. And the idea is just that you want to have opposites going, because again, we have the right and left hemispheres of our brain. And when we're doing this with opposite sides, it connects those hemispheres. And that is a good thing. All right, simple one now, hands together and make a figure 8. And then this one, backs of hands together, link your fingers. And I say kind of like push forward, and then you bring your hands back through the middle. I know that one seems goofy. Just do your best. Lock your fingers, again, kind of push out and bring through. We're only going to do 3 of these, so we have 1 more left. Back of your hands together, link your fingers, push out and bring them together. Great. And now we are ready to roll, and our brains are optimized and working as effectively in both hemispheres as possible. Actually, I like doing that from time to time. If you don't want to do that and you're with me in the future, you can put on loud music and dance, or just get up and make some movements. However, applied kinesiology is the only thing I know of that connects both hemispheres of the brain. And just a quick aside on that, if you don't like to stand up and do it, or you're sitting at your desk sometime and you go, I'm just not getting thoughts together. Maybe you're working on something creative. Maybe you're working on your plan or whatever. Take a pen in your less dominant hand and do figure 8s on a piece of paper. There you go, your tidbit for the day on how to make sure your brain is optimized. We will get back, because today we're talking about getting on target. And here we go. And I want to share this. This is talking more about a New Year's resolution. And I think we can have resolutions any time of year. I don't really care. And think about the last statement on this visual is that at the top, it says every year you make a resolution to change yourself. How about this year you make a resolution to be yourself, and be yourself in your business? Now, maybe what you're going to do some changing on is how you do your business. That doesn't mean you change you. You still have all those great qualities that you always have had. Today, we're going to do our kinesiology. Check that off the list. We're going to do a little check-in. We're going to talk about where we are, talk a little bit about buyer motivation and segmentation and your target, because of course that's our big talk today, is what is getting on target. Again, have all your tools and supplies ready to go. You had that little startup time to get ready, your journal, your notepad, index cards, whatever. And I do really like index cards, in case you haven't figured that out yet. And a mind map, again, just a reminder, this is the one on the 7 dimensions of life, to give you an idea of what it is. If today you said you want to put in that center oval, my target market, my ideal customer, something like that, you can do that and then put the branches out. I'll probably mention that again, and use that if you choose. It would actually be a great tool to use for this exercise, some of the things we're going to do today. Let's get back and review where we're at in this process. So the first pillar is get ready, and we had 4 sessions there. I believe it was 4. And now we're in the middle of get set. And actually we're on session 6. So we had 5 in that first pillar. And we're going to talk about getting on target. And then we will talk next time about revenue streams that make sense and make money. And then we will talk about upselling and cross-selling. In our last piece, we're kind of pulling it all together and getting ready for execution. So the last pillar is do a little to get a lot, master the money, and your A team. Let's start this morning and talk about buyer motivation. And there's 2 basic things that motivate people: fear and pain, or the desire for something better. And we talk about these in two concepts, the move away from and the move toward. And it's really helpful to think about your customers and where they are at in this. Now, I like to quote a really great company that's in the Minneapolis area, and it's called Intro Works. And they say that 98% of all purchase decisions are based on emotion. The decision is made based on emotion, and 2% is based on logic. Now, our group here is primarily B2B companies. I know we've got some B2C people that tune in as well. And in the B2B world, you think, oh, come on, it's not emotion. It's all logic. It's their purchasing department. It's the criteria. It's their vendor qualification, all logic. Well, still somebody's making that decision, and the decision tends to be based on emotion and supported with all sorts of facts and figures. And let's talk a little bit about these in a little more detail. So the move away from is based on fear, and fear is the strongest motivator. In some ways, I don't like to use that as a motivator when I'm dealing with clients or potential clients, and yet that usually is what gets people to move. And you probably know people, even from a personal standpoint, that you know well enough, and you go, oh, that person only moves and makes a decision when their back is against the wall, when there's fear, when there's dire consequence. And then you might know some other people where you go, well, they're just always trying to get better. They're looking for the next thing, and they're moving forward. And really, it comes down to those two things. And a lot of times businesses are looking for solutions that save them time, save them money, make them money. I think there's one more that I usually forget. And I'm pretty sure when you talk to people, if you talk to them about how you're going to make them more money, save them time, something in that vein, they're probably going to listen. Or hopefully you're drawing those issues out of them, because of course we want them to be telling us what their problems are. And you might be, well, there's another process that we're not going to get into, but there's a process of moving from big to small and small to big, those kinds of things. And the idea is that you may start out talking about the fears and the negative consequences, or the fears that the business owner, decision maker, is having at any particular time, then move into what the better future is, sort of moving them. People talk about from pain to pleasure, from A to B, from stress to success, whatever it might be. We know that there is a scale, that one end is an extreme one way and one is the other way. And if you are thinking of the pain and pleasure, that's obviously a pretty clear distinction. And we want to get people on their pain path and get clarity of that and move them to the pleasure, to the positive outcome. And we're going to use a few different tools that I use in the membership group. So we're going to have a little different process today. Let me know if you got any questions on anything as we cover this. Put it in the Facebook group and I can respond to you. Anyway, that is what I wanted to share about buyer motivation. Really pay attention to that. Then getting to your target market. We're going to work at this a couple different ways. And the first thing is that I've got some information that Tony Robbins gave me and said I could use, and it's a little bit of his lingo and a little bit of mine, and he calls it 7 levels narrow. And this is where you start with the bigger concept and you get it smaller, smaller, smaller. It's like coming down a funnel. You narrow and narrow and narrow. And what I want you to do now is we're going to take a little time on this, and we're going to talk about who is your target market. And another way to look at it is to say, who is your ideal customer? Because we're going to talk a little bit more about what target market really means so that you've got the background for that. So now I'd like you to think about, what is your ideal customer? If you've got somebody that you've worked with and you say, if I could just get 5 more of those or 10 more of those or whatever it might be, think about that. And the 7 levels narrow, what I do is I just say, keep asking yourself, what if? Or I'm sorry, what else? What else? What else? What else? What else? So the first thing I want you to do is start with whatever comes to mind. And we're going to take, I think we'll do 3 minutes on this. And I'm going to get my timer set up. The process then, here's what I want you to do, is take a piece of paper and write 7 numbers along the side, the left side, leave some space in between each of those. So yeah, you kind of need a separate piece of paper for this. And the very first one you're going to do is my ideal customer. And you can be somewhat vague. So let's just say, for example, that you're a manufacturing company and you have a machine shop, and that you work with companies that, I'll just use my world, make medical devices. So maybe the first thing you do is you say, medical device company. All right. Then you go, well, what else? And you might say, because there's a lot of them in my geographic area, whether you are in Boston or Silicon Valley or Minnesota. Silicon Valley, I'm not sure if they're big, but Boston and Minnesota still are. And then you go, well, they're going to be in this geographic area. All right. And you go, well, what else? Well, they're going to be of a certain size because certain sizes use outside contractors like a machine shop like mine. Okay. So you specify that. Then you might get even more clear and you might say, beyond that, these are companies that deal with implantable devices, or maybe they're not. So you distinguish there and you just keep picking and picking and getting it smaller and smaller and smaller until you get down and you go, you might end up and say, all right, it's these 10 companies that are in this area that do this, that have these needs and these problems and serve you get it as specific as possible. There was a little bit of an example for you. So now I want you to get into that. My timer just went into la la land. So take 3 minutes. Let's see how you go in 3 minutes and just write down everything and start with number 1, get more specific in number 2 and more specific on each one as you go down 7 levels. So when you get to slab 7, where the gold is. All right, let's get going. Take 3 minutes, think of everything you can, and write that down. Just about a minute and a half left. Keep writing. About 30 seconds left. All right. How did that go? Were you able to get more clarity and define things more? Because that is the goal. There's another exercise I'm just going to tell you about right now that you could also engage in. And I'm going to just show you. I think this will show up. My worksheet that I made up for this. So it's defining and refining pains or problems, and then what your solution or result is going to be. And again, I'll just give this to you because we work through this in the membership group, and here we do things a little differently. What you want to do is really get clear on what pains do you solve for your client, and then get really, really clear on what results or outcome they get. Because we had a little bit of a discussion last week, and somebody said, well, I want to know the steps that you do. And I thought, well, I was talking to a business friend that could refer business to me, and I thought, you're not even a prospect. And my problem or my job is to talk to any potential client and find out what is their problem, where is their pain, where are they struggling, right? And so when he says, well, I want to know your steps, I'm thinking, I'm not even sure we're ready to talk about a solution. So in this case too, it's a little different with a referral person, where you're not actually solving their problem because you want them to give you referrals. So keep in mind that people buy results. They don't really care about us and where we came from and how great and brilliant we are or aren't, or whatever the case may be. They want a solution, right? So keep thinking about that. Another area that you can work on then in relation to this, and we're not going to, well, you know what, we're going to take just a couple minutes to do this. Okay, so here's the worksheet that I've made up for this one. Is I talk about your target market and your ideal customer. And again, we do a lot more with this in the member group, so I'm kind of giving you the highlights here. Think about, we'll take a couple minutes on this. What do your customers struggle with? What are their pains? And then, just like we did before, you want to keep going. Well, what else? What else? What else? What else? And what will happen if they don't, let me see, if they don't use you or hire you, if they don't buy your product or service? And then get into, well, what else? What else? The thing that's most important here is to keep digging, 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 because it's so easy to just say, well, I work with companies that X. You probably need to know a little bit more than that and dig in a little bit more. And again, you might have that all figured out. Let's just take 2 minutes, and I want you to brainstorm. Be great if you had another piece of paper, a different piece of paper than what you had last time. And let's just take 2 minutes and write down, what do your customers struggle with, if you can. This would be down the road. If you can, though, if you can, what do they say? How do they articulate this? Do they say, well, I'm too busy to get to this, or we're losing money, or we've got customers leaving, or maybe you work on the HR side, people aren't getting along, the team isn't working together, whatever it is, just write down the problem and then dig, dig, dig. What else? What else? What else? If they don't hire you, then maybe when you get down to about the third level, if they don't hire you, buy your product or service, what negative consequence are they going to experience? And then dig a little bit more in that. Let's just take 2 minutes and write down everything you can think of on that. And we'll be back. about 45 seconds to go. All righty. And as I mentioned earlier, it is a great time to use a mind map where you put the issue in the middle of your paper and then you draw the branches out, because now you can go back and add to that. Sometimes it's easier to do that than if I do my things like this too, that I've got forms with spaces for people to write things in. You can do that if you wrote it on a piece of paper and you left space. Hopefully you can go back and add to that. And just give you another example. All right, I work with businesses primarily in the B2B space when they're going to engage me versus our group type of option. And everything I do is to help them increase their revenue and profits. So that might be my starting point. And then I say, all right, I need to find companies that are stalled out, might be turnarounds, might be in tough shape, might just be limping along and need some help. All right, so I'm refining. And then I might say, you know what? They need to be, my sweet spot is 10 to 50 million in revenue. Okay, I've defined that. And they need to be business to business. And they probably don't have a senior marketing person because they're going to bring me in as their part-time vice president of marketing to make sure everything gets done and they know things are being done at a high level versus all kinds of tactical things. All right, the CEO is busy. Most CEOs are. And the smaller the company, it seems to be that most CEOs have multiple jobs and they're running ragged half of the time. And then I might say, all right, I prefer they be in manufacturing, and in particular, manufacturing in high tech or med tech. Now, sort of you go, well, high tech software companies aren't really manufacturers. Okay, fine. That works. That still works. But I might say manufacturing, high tech, med tech, or industrial companies. Then I might say certain number of employees. I might say 10 employees or more, and 100 employees is the largest. And I might define whether I want them to be a product or a service company. And I might even identify that I want them to have one location, or I might say I work with companies that have multiple locations. So you see how this just gets narrower. So I would say, all right, so my ideal client is a B2B company in the 10 to 50 million revenue range that doesn't have a senior marketing person, where the CEO is super busy and they're going to be in one of these three industries, industrial, med tech, or high tech. They're going to have 10 employees, or let's just say 10 to 50 employees. They're going to be a product company, and they're going to have no more than 3 locations. See how all of a sudden I could just describe this, and if I'm talking to somebody might go, oh, well, that would be company A, B, C. Or I would go to a search or whatever and refine things, and all of a sudden I know very clearly who I want to do business with. Now, there's some other things that can certainly factor in that. That's just an example of how you want to get super clear. Now, the other way that I have defined it a little bit is because my world is small business and then small to mid. That's the 10 to 50. Do you call them small? Do you call them mid? Whatever. And I have done a lot of work with small businesses. I've written my marketing manual 4 times, or written it once and then edited it 3 or 4 times, and worked a lot with small businesses. And the challenge in working with small businesses is all of you here have as much need as a larger company. You just don't have as much money to pay someone to do all of this work and be at a senior level. If you're looking to hire somebody as a VP of marketing, you're going to pay $200,000 to $400,000. Well, if you're a small business, you might just choke even hearing those numbers. And then you might say, boy, I'm definitely in the wrong place. And even in a mid-sized company, well, that's a big chunk of change. And you've got the CEO to pay, you've got a CFO, you've got your ops person, you got your strategic marketing person to figure out how you're going to grow the business and where you're going to find customers and all that. This ends up being a lot of money. So fractional or hiring people on interim or part-time has certainly become a good solution for a lot of businesses. Now we're going to talk about some specifics here, and I will use my manual so that I do practice what I preach and I do use my materials. Let's talk a little bit about market segmentation and what that means, because you might be around people that have an education and experience where they use some of the terminology versus those people a lot of times in agency work that haven't actually had an education in marketing will use other words that relate more to what they do. Let's then take a look at market segmentation. And basically, market segmentation is identifying traits or characteristics of your desired or potential customer or client. It's just coming up with the whole list, as you saw when I gave you my example, of things to narrow it down. And what you want to do is come up with as many things as you can to describe the customers. Then we're going to get to the target market, and that's when you come down the funnel and narrow it and say, all right, let's just say you had 50 variables, and then you pick and you go, all right, this, and pretty soon you have 10 variables maybe to describe your ideal customer or your target market. You can use those terms interchangeably. The other thing that a lot of agency people use is persona, avatar, and that persona and avatar are a little bit more attuned to the B2C world. Plus, they've kind of come up with their own language to help clarify things for people. Let's talk a little bit here about what does this mean. I know we're a B2B group, and because there's some B2C people sitting in and watching replays and so on, let's talk a little bit about what are some of the things when you talk about segmentation or describing your customer that would be applicable for consumer products. And you can see I've got things listed here: geographic, demographic, psychographic, and buyer behavior. And by the time you get to those last two, you probably are going to be pulling your hair out, right? Because they sound like big fat words that are confusing. Let's talk about the easy stuff first. So in geographic, as you're trying to describe your customer, your ideal customer, think about region. This might be the county even, or the size of the county. It might be city size. It might be the density. Obviously, urban and suburban have different densities. That might be a factor. It could even be climate, because in the consumer market, maybe you have a product that's geared towards people that live in places where it gets cold. Maybe you have the opposite and you work with customers where it's hot a lot of the time, or more moderate on the warm to hot side. Let's talk just a little bit about what do we mean by demographics, and most people are familiar with that term. It's got a lot of things to it. It can be age, it can be gender, it can be family size, it can be family life cycle, and it can be income, it can be occupation, it can be education level, it can be religion. Yeah, touchy subject, but depending on what you do, that might be something you key in on. It can be race, it can be nationality, and you can even throw in some more things as well. Those are the main ones when we talk about demographics. Then psychographic, yeah, this is the one that gets a little bit fuzzy. It's not quite as confusing as it sounds. So psychographic can be things like social class of your target, or just brainstorm a bunch and then you can refine it. The lifestyle, you could have outdoorsy people, you could have homebodies, you could have retirees, you could have Gen X, Gen Z, millennials, that kind of thing. Maybe you haven't thought about that. And personality. Yep, you can even segment your market based on the personality of people. And then there's the behavioral segmentation. And again, in the C world, the consumer world, it's things like the purchase occasion, the benefits that they are seeking from your product or service, their user status, usage rates, loyalty status, readiness status, attitude towards your product or service. There's a lot there, and I'm not going to get into the details on all those. That gets a little bit more sophisticated, and I think you can probably do some digging on an internet search or use artificial intelligence to get that, or post a question in the Facebook group. Let's talk a little bit then about the B2B world, the business to business world, since that's where most of us are hanging out. And you've got some similar things. You've got demographic again, you've got operating, you got purchase process, situational issues, and personal factors. And you could probably come up with more. These are the ones that are kind of the accepted areas within how we still look at this and teach this. And so let's look at the demographic segmentation now in the B2B space. And you probably have some ideas because of the example that I gave. Industry type, okay, certain industry, and you might be using SIC codes or something like that. And then the company size that I mentioned in my example, revenue, number of employees, number of locations, and that's all going to vary a little bit based on the industry as well. And then location, is there a geographic area? Is it regional? Is it city? Any particular city? Is it then a region? Is it national? Is it international? There's lots of things you can do to refine this as well. And the purchase process is the third area, and that's things like, does the business that you sell to, your target, your ideal, have centralized or decentralized purchasing? What about the company orientation? Existing relationships in this in the ideal companies or not? What are their purchasing priorities and purchasing policies? So there's a whole list of things. And as you start working in bigger companies, if that's your target as well, they often have vendor criteria and certification programs, and that might be a reason to do business with them, or it might be a business that you don't want to get involved with because of all the extra work that you need to do just to qualify, and then you don't even know if you're going to get business with them, right? But again, that might be another way to set yourself apart, is that you go through the process. So there's a lot of things to consider. Another part here is situational issues. Just briefly, there's a couple things that fall into that. That's order size would be a situational issue. Are they ordering mass quantity, little things? What application are they using your product or service for? And are there multiples? And then you can refine it down to one or two maybe. And degree of urgency. For example, if you have clients that work in the automotive industry, that's their customers, let's just say, and the automotive companies, let's just say, because I don't know for sure, they were selling like crazy, we know, during COVID. And then things kind of have calmed down. There was a big push in electric for a while. Now there's more interest in hybrids, all of that. So maybe if you're dealing with an ideal customer in automotive, you've got to look at, if things are not going so good, maybe the degree of urgency is higher and they need my help more than ever. And again, I talk mostly because I'm talking marketing strategy, growing a business. And if you're in HR or if you're in operations or other things, take this and do your interpretation of what might be appropriate. All right, last part here is personal factors, because you're also dealing with a person that's going to make a decision. What's their attitude toward risk? Have you mitigated risk? We talked about that a little bit when we were talking about getting customers to love you and building relationships and trust and all of that. Loyalty to suppliers. Have they already said, got 3 suppliers, that's it, not even talking to anybody else? Are they loyal to them? Are they doing it for simplicity? It can be any number of reasons. And buyer-seller likeness. There might be some companies that you do business with because you have a similar value system in your organization. Maybe your vision and mission align. There's been a lot of talk about that. Or maybe you're in the same basic industry and you're upstream or downstream. Well, another bunch of lingo that gets used, upstream and downstream. However, if you're, in that same vertical, then You might have that buyer and seller likeness. There can be other things as well. It's just a few things for you to think about. And then target markets are the combination of these different variables or characteristics that you want to focus on for your business. All these different things. Let's just say you brainstorm and you write down 50 ideas. In fact, we'll take just a couple minutes to do that. And then what you do is you come back and you go, okay, here's a whole bunch of things that could describe my market. Then you come back and maybe, I'm kind of one of these people likes highlighters. Maybe you've got a whole big list. And then you come back with your highlighter and go, now, which of those is the most important? And if I have a picture in my mind of my ideal customer, what of those many variables, characteristics, best describe my ideal that I want more of? Let's just take a minute here. Let's hold on that. Let's just take a minute and do a little bit of segmentation work. And again, this is a great thing to do. I would take another piece of paper and you could mind map this. I'm not sure if I would. Let's just take 1 minute to just do a brain dump and come up with everything you can think of that could possibly describe your customer. And that's your segmentation. And then we're going to come back and do the target market. So here's your assignment. A piece of paper up at the top. You might write segmentation or variables or characteristics, whatever you want. And just do a brain dump as fast as you can to describe anybody that could benefit from doing business with you. All right, you got a minute. Go. All right, that was 1 minute. How did you do? I know I didn't give you a lot of time on that. Other phone. Sure we aren't getting too many interruptions here. Now, what I want you to do is take a highlighter, or if you have that sheet where we started out and I said 7 layers, keep asking what if or what next, what else, what else, what else, what else. Let's keep this a little bit separate though. Let's go to that big brain dump of segmentation variables, just all kinds of descriptive words. Now, what I want you to do is go back. We're just going to take, well, we'll take still a minute. Take your highlighter and go back. And of all the stuff that you just did in a massive, quick brain dump, highlight or circle, star, whatever works for you, those things that you go, all right, if I can describe my best, my ideal, my perfect, well, as perfect as we can get, customer or client, mark those. You got a minute. Okay, that is about it. And you're probably going, well, didn't we just go through this and come up with my 7 narrow and come down the funnel? Yes, you did. What I want you to do now, we've talked in some technical terms and given you some other things to think about. What I want you to do between sessions is take your list of segmentation ideas, the brain dump, take your target market now, the ones that you highlighted, go back to your 7 levels narrow where you described your ideal client and you kept saying, what else, what else, what else, what else? Now go back, compare these. Is there anything new to add? Did you miss something? Where are you at? And again, this is a great one to mind map where you can go back and you can look at your disparate pieces of paper and put it in a mind map, and then look at this every morning this week and see what else comes to mind. Is there anything you've missed? Have you been clear? Just keep working on it. A couple different images I wanted to show you is this is from John Assaraf. You can see his name down there, Assaraf. And in fact, he talks also about the move toward and the move away from. Anyway, this is kind of interesting, I think, because a lot of times we get ourselves easily caught up in goofy thinking. I'll just say that. Maybe it's me. And think about the fact that 5% of your target market is ready to buy. 5%. All right. And there's 15% of those that fit our parameters that we want to keep in touch with and we want to connect with and educate, keep them on an email list, do something. And then there's probably 80% out there that aren't interested. Now that can be that they're not interested now. That can change. Here's another image. Take whatever makes sense to you. And when we talk about this, that inner circle is where we want to be and where we want to be really, really strong. That is our niche or our target market. And I don't know, some of this terminology I think was made up by people that just were trying to figure out another way to talk about it. As you go out from that inner core where that is your best opportunity, you get to what is called the narrower market. Well, that opens up a few more pieces of segmentation. Then you get to the narrow, and that opens up a little bit more. So you could be adding additional descriptors or criteria characteristics. Then you get to the less broad. It's even a bigger circle, and then the broad market. Well, generally the broad market is probably not going to be too much worth your time. And again, or you could start with the broad market. And then again, because we've talked about going deeper and deeper and deeper, you can see how if you start with the broad and you go to the next level down, you eliminate some stuff, you get more specific, you get more specific, you get more specific, all the way down to that center where you now have figured out your sweet spot and described your ideal customer or your target market. I am wearing my zebra shirt today, and I wanted to share this image with you. It says, some stripes are zebras. Obviously, you can see that. And yet, it's almost like a Bev Doolittle painting where you're looking, you're, oh, yeah, there's zebras in the middle. There's all these stripes going on. You probably know that every zebra has a different stripe pattern. Every one is unique. It's not like if you're a foal of mom A that you're going to have the same stripes, or that if your mom, the mare has a couple of colts, that those 2 or 3 colts are going to be matching. No, they're all different. And I like this analogy just to say that, yeah, some stripes are zebras. We are all unique. We are all different. Every single zebra, it has a different pattern, and so do we. And that's going to take us into our talk about positioning and differentiation. Another bit of getting more clarity. Positioning is creating a specific or unique image for your product or service in the target customer's mind. And just as we had this image with the zebras, if I said, are you a zebra? What comes into your mind? The picture of a zebra. We know what a zebra is. And positioning then is where you have done such a great job that people could describe your business that they get an image, they get a picture. And if I said golden arches, instantly, I'm talking McDonald's. If I said charcoal broiled, you get Burger King, and you might get the Burger King, or you might get some other part, or you might have the picture of them grilling the burgers, right? And Wendy's, of course, you get the picture of Dave Thomas's daughter that became the icon there. That's what we're talking about. Positioning is, what is it that we have done such a great job that we now have created an image in the mind of our customer. That is where we want to go. And differentiation is determining all the differences in your product, service, or your company, and what makes you different than everybody else out there. You could be in a market where you don't have a lot of competition. Who knows? That's kind of unusual. However, most of us are in that competitive marketplace. So think about just being that zebra that has unique stripes. Now, how do you talk about that? How do you get them to understand? And I want to mention just another point here. If you're in a service business, think about productizing your service. And what I mean by that is, give it a name, give it a package, give it a, here's the platinum approach, and you get these 10 elements. Here's the gold approach, and you get these 8, and here's the silver, whatever. You can do things like that. You can do beginner, advanced, intermediate. You can do, well, good, better, best is usually internal lingo, but you can use good, better, best. That's often used in the software world. Think about, just like our group is Ready, Set, Grow. And the membership group has a different name, and we try to create a different identity. So think about, how can you create something? And a lot of times by naming it, you give it more of substance, and you can position, differentiate on that. We're not going to talk too much today. Just keep in mind that you have two kinds of competition: direct competition and indirect. Direct are companies, organizations that do pretty much the same thing you do. And indirect are the ones that are a little bit off. So let's just say in a consumer world that you're a restaurant, okay? Well, direct competition, let's say you're a fine dining restaurant. Well, direct competition are all those in fine dining. Indirect might be the next tier down, sit down restaurants, but they're more of a casual atmosphere. They're not fine dining. They don't have the tablecloth, all that kind of stuff. That's the difference between direct and indirect. And when we are solving somebody's problem, they can go to a direct competitor of ours, or they can go to an indirect. Most likely the indirects aren't going to solve the problem as well. And we want to make sure that the direct don't solve problems as well as we do. Here's just a little graphic that you could take a look at. And you can see on the vertical axis, we've got differentiation. So that's what is unique, what makes your business different. On the bottom, we have cost of production, because depending on your business, to be more different, maybe it costs you more as an operating expense. Let's just take a look kind of quickly here. In the death zone, you have a high cost of production and you have little differentiation. This basically is a no-go. If it costs a lot to produce your product or service and it's not very unique, you're in trouble, because people aren't going to pay you what you need for something that doesn't really stand out. Moving over here to the right on that bottom is where you have a low cost of production. Okay, good. It's not going to cost as much. And you have low differentiation. All right, this is a commodity business. This could be real easy if we said something like ag products, grain, soybeans. How's it different? Well, think about one idea here. Idaho potatoes. Potatoes are a commodity, are they not? They have worked to distinguish that if they're made in Idaho, there's something different about them. And that's how you can do some differentiation to get you out of that commodity business. Let's go up to premium. And this can be a high cost to produce your product or service and high differentiation. This is a great spot to be in. This is where, even though they're having all kinds of problems now, there's a company called 3M. Most of their products are premium. They might be costly to produce. Some of them are, definitely, and highly differentiated. When they're on the chemical side of the business, they might be the only producer of a particular ingredient that somebody else needs for their production. It can be costly and then they're going to sell it for a high price, and it's so highly differentiated, they're the only ones doing this. I could tell you stories about that, but don't take the time right now. Then you move into what's called the world beater over here in the upper corner to the right. This is where you've got a low cost of production and you've differentiated your product. Well, hey, this is kind of like nirvana, isn't it? A lot of software companies fall into here because once you get your basic software down, then your additional costs are not that high. Or like if you're doing something where you're producing that, we don't have it so much now, but where you're producing CDs or DVDs, once you have the basic technology, then you just crank out the production line and you have a low cost and high differentiation. So see if this helps you clarify anything. And got questions, put them in the group. And what I wanted to share too is that when you can be specific, when you can be different, you're going to have higher revenues and profits. So you get what I call the trifecta. And that's where we all want to get. Or another idea here is on the left, you can see my arrow going down, that we want to get more and more specific. It's like moving down that funnel and getting more and more specific. And we've talked about that today, and I've given you some examples. And as you get more and more specific, your revenue and profits go up. So they're inversely related. And that is a great spot to be in, don't you think? Let's talk a little bit more about positioning. This is really, really a challenge, and I encourage you to get the Trout and Reeves book that has been the classic in this. It's called Positioning: The Battle for Your Mind, and the two authors are Trout, T-R-O-U-T, and Reeves, R-I-E-S, I believe is how he spells it. They come out of the advertising world years ago. And think about having an overall positioning statement, and you can see how that's described here. And start with a position for your company, and then you can get into positioning each product. Again, that's kind of the funnel approach. And there's some questions as well that you could ask yourself. Is the product or service characteristics or communicating those benefits, is that being received? We do a lot of research on this, and this is a great area for you to research yourself. However, again, it's best if you can get a professional to do this because of bias and all the other stuff. And some of the questions that you start digging into here really are better done by somebody not connected to the company to get that third-party objective. And what we have found invariably is people are much more willing to talk to a third party. All right, second question here. Is a product or service position in the most meaningful way in relation to how the customer or client buys? Are you getting to them in the right way? Have you got the right distribution? Do they buy online? Do they buy face-to-face? Do they work through dealers, distributors, manufacturers, reps? What is the best way to get to them? And if you're B2B, you know you have quite a few different options there. And how do we best position the company to be different? Key thing. Down the road here is a position communicated consistently and effectively. Anything that we're doing, whether it's positioning, differentiation, our features, benefits, our solutions, communication is absolutely essential. And again, a couple questions here. What distinguishes us? What makes us different? What is our special talent or skill? If there's something here that you go, oh, that one gets me, write it down and then go work with it. And I even have a checklist here. Let me know if you need some help with that. And I want to wrap up here. And I kind of like this. I'm not sure if that's showing properly. Where I love this image. The world is changed by your example, not by your opinion. And all of us in our businesses want to make a difference. We want to serve customers. We want to help solve their problems. And I just like this image because it's a great example of showing how somebody did make a difference. What do you do in the next few days before we meet again next Monday? Look at your mind maps if you're using them. And again, we had a few things here to work on. Pull those out. If you've just got pieces of paper that you had in one of the topics of talking about your ideal customer, and you got that sheet with all the 7 levels down, take that. If you did a mind map, take that, pull these pieces together and take a few minutes every day to look at that and see how you're coming. So look at anything else you have done. Think about your customer motivations. If you haven't thought about that before, think about, are they a move toward or are they a move away from? And then anything again that we did on segmentation, targeting, those are the terms from a purist standpoint, positioning and differentiation. It all gets down to what makes you different, what makes you unique, what problems do you solve, and who needs you. Let me know if you have any questions, and we will continue on next time talking about different revenue streams. Put any questions in the Facebook group. You probably know how to reach me if that doesn't work. And I encourage you to keep working on these. I love this stuff in case you can't figure out. And this is so important and really some of the basic building blocks that any business needs if we're going to be successful. Thanks for tuning in. And I guess we'll just see you next time. If you know some businesses that are interested in learning more and would like to join our free group, send them over. They can apply. If you know people that are looking for more help on that one-on-one hand-holding, step-by-step, more of what we did today is what we do in our member group. Let me know about that. And then, you know what? I'm still available for those companies that are bigger, the 10 million up, that say, hey, can you just come in? Can we hire you part-time? The other thing I'm doing is doing a lot more with artificial intelligence. If you need some help on that, let me know and we'll get you on an email list or something so that you can figure out when we could work together or when I've got a program that you would like to tune in on. Thanks again, and we will see you next week.